So our second method for solving a quadratic equation is solve using the square root property. First method we talked about was solve by factoring. Okay, so I have 3 examples here, so it might be kind of a long video, but we're going to solve all of these by using the square root property. Now you'll know you can use the square root property when you have the variable or a variable expression squared equaling something. Okay, that says, hey, I can use the square root property. Okay, and that might not be like enough for you to know, and I'll try to help you here in a second. Okay, so you can take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. And so we get x equals, and then we have to simplify this. So 8 is 4 times 2, the square root of 4 is 2, so I get plus or minus 2 square root 2. Now one thing to note on that, when you take the square root of 4, that 2 goes right there. It goes between the plus or minus and the square root. Now, if you want to write them separately, you can. Sometimes they like that. I think WebAssign might like that. And that's how you'd write them separately. You have the negative square root 2, the negative 2 square root 2 and the positive 2 square root 2. Okay, now I want to go back to what I was talking about a minute ago. How do you know when you can use the square root property? If I have x squared plus 2x equals 7, no, I cannot use no on square root property. Okay, and here's why. You can't take the square root of this because how are you going to do that with the other x in there? And if you put the 2 on the other side, then that's going to be a problem. So that's not going to work. Now, if I had something like this, x plus 3 squared equals, 7, that I could take the square root of both sides. So I'm hoping you can see the difference. We have an example like this further on down, but that's okay, because then you're going to have x plus 3, and you just have the x, you don't have any x's on the right, equals x equals plus or minus the square root of 7. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but I might as well finish it, right? Bonus problem. Okay, so just subtract the 3, and you get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. Okay, don't worry if that one scares you. I'm going to do another example that's very similar in a minute. Okay. All right, so let's look at this problem. Where's the variable? Well, you have x right there, right? Okay, you don't have any other x's, so you can subtract 1. That's fine. 4x squared equals 6. You can divide both sides by 4. Okay, divide both sides by 4. I get x squared equals, you know what? I'm going to keep it 6 over 4. Now, normally we would, that's going to throw you. Okay, I won't do that. But you'll see why I said that in a minute. Okay, normally we would reduce the fraction. So I'll go with what we would normally do. Okay, now you have something squared, x squared on the left, equals 3 over 2. So you can take the square root of both sides. Okay, don't forget the plus or minus. So now what do you have? You have x equals plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. But you're not allowed to have a fraction under a radical, so you have to multiply by 2 here, which is going to get us back to x equals plus or minus the square root of 6 over 4, and then that's going to be x equals plus or minus the square root of 6 over 2, because you can take the square root of 4. Okay, so that's the answer. Or the answers, I should say. There are 2 answers there. Negative square root 6, like negative square root 6 over 2. And the other answer is positive square root 6 over 2. Now, I don't care if you use the plus or minus, but I think in WebAssign you have to write them separately. Okay, so I've got one more problem here. I see the x, I see the square. I don't need that 3 there. I could divide both sides by 3. Now, why am I doing that? Like, how do I know? I want to get the squared part by itself, okay? So then I can take the square root of both sides. So I want to get these 3's out of here. Okay, so I divide both sides by 3, and I get x minus 4 squared equals 5. Okay, so this is now like that problem I did, the bonus problem I did. Okay, I'm allowed to take the square root of both sides, so here we go. Don't forget the plus or minus. Okay, so now what do I get? I get x minus 4 on the left, because the square and the square root, those like undo each other, they cancel each other out. So x minus 4 on the left equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Now, I can't simplify that radical. It's just the square root of 5. If I could simplify it, I would. Okay, now here's the thing. We have to add 4 to both sides. And where does that 4 go? It goes in front of the plus or minus. Okay? All right, so I get 2 answers. If I'm going to write them separately, one is 4 minus the square root of 5. The other is 4 plus the square root of 5. Okay? Now let's say you had something like, let me just do another little bonus thing here. Let's say you had something like x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of, what's a good one? 50. Okay? Well, 50 can simplify, right? Like 25 times 2. So you take the square root of 25, and you would have x plus 2 equals plus or minus, and then you'd have 5 square root 2. So that's when that 5 like goes right in front of the radical, behind the plus or minus, but in front of the radical. Okay, now if I subtracted 2 from both sides, I would get x equals negative 2 plus or minus 5 square root 2. So it's got to go, like sometimes I'll draw an arrow, it's got to go, it's got to go over here in front of the plus or minus. So I hope that makes sense, but anyway, good luck.